The field was quiet after the battle. Smoke rose from broken machines, and the air carried the smell of burned metal. The ground was torn apart, marked by craters where weapons had struck. Among the scattered ruins, the cries of the injured slowly faded until only silence remained. At the center of that silence lay a figure. She was a warrior of the Zorth, the proud alien people who had fought against humanity for years. Her armor, once shining with the colors of her house, was now cracked and broken. Deep wounds marked her body, and her weapon rested just beyond her reach. Even so, her presence was enough to keep others away. The warrior's name was known across the stars. She had led armies, defeated champions, and stood unbroken in dozens of battles. Even those who hated her spoke her name with respect. To face her in combat was to face a storm. Now she lay on the ground, her strength leaving her. Yet no one dared to approach. Her soldiers stood at a distance, whispering to one another. Some wanted to rush to her side, but fear held them still. To touch her in her weakened state without permission was dangerous. If she woke and saw weakness in them, her wrath would be terrible. Among the Zorth, honor mattered more than life. A warrior was never to be seen as helpless, not even by her own kind. The alien king himself had arrived to see her condition. His tall form cast a long shadow across the battlefield. His crown, carved from dark crystal, glimmered faintly in the dim light. His eyes rested on the wounded warrior with both pride and sorrow. She had been his strongest blade, the shield of his throne. Now she lay broken, and even he did not dare move closer. Let her be. The king commanded in a voice that carried across the ruined field. She will rise, or she will fall. None shall touch her. His words were final, and his soldiers obeyed. They stood guard in silence, watching their champion breathe faintly. Each rise and fall of her chest slower than the last. Not far from them, hidden behind a fallen wall, a group of human survivors gathered. They had been part of the battle. But unlike the Zorth, they had no king, no crown, and no champion. They had fought with desperation, and many of them had fallen. Only a few remained alive, and among them was a medic named Tomas. Tomas had seen much in the war. He had patched wounds under fire, carried the dying on his back, and buried friends when no one else could. He was not a soldier of strength or speed, but his hands were steady, and his will was stronger than fear. He looked across the broken field and saw the warrior lying helpless. The others whispered to him, "Do not even think about it. That is their champion. If you go near her, you will be killed." But Tomas did not listen. He saw not an enemy, not a monster, not a weapon of war. He saw a life hanging by a thread. His training had taught him one thing above all else: every life mattered. He stood slowly, brushing dust from his uniform. His bag of medical tools rested against his side, worn from years of use. He stepped out from the shadow of the wall, and his figure became clear to both human and Zorth eyes. A murmur spread through the alien soldiers as they saw the human walking forward. Weapons were raised, but the king lifted a hand to stop them, his sharp gaze fixed on the medic. Curious, what was this fragile human doing, walking so calmly into danger? Tomas moved carefully, his boots crunching against broken stone. His eyes never left the warrior on the ground. She was breathing still, but barely. Blood seeped through her armor, and her body trembled with weakness. Every step brought tension. The alien soldiers whispered. The human survivors held their breath. Even the king's eyes narrowed in silence when Tomas finally reached her side. He knelt down and opened his bag. His hands moved quickly, yet gently. He checked her wounds, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the weight of countless eyes upon him. The warrior stirred faintly, her head moving slightly as if she sensed him. Her eyes opened a fraction, glowing faintly with the fire of her people. She saw the human leaning over her. For a moment, her lips curled as if to form a word. Perhaps an insult, perhaps a warning. But no strength came to her voice. Tomas did not flinch. He spoke softly, his tone calm and even. "You are hurt. I will help." She did not reply, but her gaze lingered on him, confused by his lack of fear. Among her people, weakness was shame. and to be seen in such a state was worse than death. Yet this human did not mock her, did not recoil, did not claim victory. He simply worked. The alien king watched closely. His soldiers shifted uneasily. No one dared interrupt. And so the human medic became the only one to stand beside the fallen warrior. In that moment, the battlefield was no longer about victory or defeat, about crowns or banners. It was about a single choice, to walk away or to step forward when no one else dared. Tomas had chosen. The silence of the field grew heavier, filled with expectation. The warrior's life now rested in the hands of a man who was not her kin, not her ally, and not her servant, a human among aliens, a medic among warriors. He worked as the last light of day began to fade. The warrior's breathing grew steadier as the sun sank behind distant mountains. Shadows stretched across the battlefield, covering broken weapons and scarred ground. Yet despite the fading light, the tension around her remained. No one moved. Not the alien soldiers, not the king, and not even the human survivors who watched from afar. The Zorth soldiers formed a loose circle around the fallen warrior. Their eyes were sharp, but their hands stayed away. Each of them knew the rules of honor and fear. A warrior could not be touched when vulnerable, unless she allowed it. To break that rule was to invite her wrath, even if she could barely move. They whispered quietly among themselves, voices low and cautious. "Do you think she will survive?" asked one young soldier. His voice trembled, betraying both fear and hope. "Do not ask such questions," said another, older and scarred from many battles. "To speak too much is to show weakness. The king watches. Do not forget that." The alien king remained at a distance, standing tall atop a slight rise in the ground. His crown glimmered faintly in the dying sunlight. He observed silently, studying the human medic and the fallen warrior. He had seen courage before, but what this human displayed was unlike anything in his memory. To face a warrior of the Zorth, the pride of his kingdom, and to do so without fear required more than training. It required heart. The human medic, Tomas, continued his work without hesitation. His hands moved carefully over the warrior's injuries. He cleaned cuts, applied bandages, and whispered small words of reassurance. Though he could not speak the alien tongue fluently, his tone carried a calm authority that needed no translation. The warrior's eyes followed his every movement. At first, she had been angry, her pride hurt by the act of a human touching her. Now, she watched silently. Confusion and curiosity battled with the fading fire in her body. She had never known a human to show such respect, such calmness in the face of danger. Around them, the silence stretched. The wind blew softly, carrying the smell of scorched earth and smoke. Birds had begun to return to the trees, their distant cries small, against the quiet tension of the battlefield. Every now and then, a soldier shifted, a boot scraping the dirt. But no one dared speak loudly. The rules of honor and fear bound them from the shadows. Other humans watched Tomas. They had seen him heal countless injured, but none had dared approach a Zorth warrior of such reputation. One young human whispered, "Do you think he can do it?" "He has no choice," another replied. "If he does not try, she dies, and he knows it." Hours passed. The warrior remained still, but her breathing became steadier. Tomas continued to work, occasionally pressing a small device to measure her vital signs. The alien king's sharp eyes never left the scene. His mind, usually filled with strategy and commands, now struggled to understand this simple act of bravery and care. Finally, the warrior spoke, her voice weak and raspy. "Why do you help me?" Tomas paused and looked up, meeting her glowing eyes. "Because you are hurt. You need help. That is all," he said. His words were simple, but they carried weight. He did not speak of enemies or victories or fear. He spoke only of life. Her eyes narrowed, trying to measure the truth in his words. The Zorth warriors around them held their breath. The king's hand tightened slightly on the hilt of his ceremonial sword. To hear her question, to see her doubt, was itself unusual. No one had dared speak to her while she was down. The warrior's lips moved again, forming words she could barely speak. Humans cannot be trusted. Tomas smiled faintly. I'm not asking you to trust me. I am only asking you to survive. For a moment, the warrior did not respond. Her pride warred with her fading strength. Yet the truth in the human's eyes was undeniable. He would not harm her. He would not rush her. He would not judge her. He would simply help. The alien king, observing the exchange, felt a strange emotion stir inside him. He had ruled over his people for decades, but he had never seen courage like this. Not the courage of battle, but the courage to act when fear is everywhere. When all expect you to turn away, humanity, he realized, had a strength that no blade could measure. As twilight deepened, the first stars appeared in the sky. The battlefield, once filled with noise and chaos, now lay under the calm gaze of night. Tomas finished applying the last of his bandages. He sat quietly, letting the warrior rest. The tension around them remained, but it shifted slightly. No one moved too close, but no one withdrew either. The warrior's eyes closed for a moment, exhaustion overtaking anger. Her breathing was steady, her body still weak but slowly regaining strength. For the first time, she did not feel alone. A human, the enemy in battle, had chosen to stand with her, not against her. The king finally spoke, his voice low but firm. Leave them be. Let the warrior rest. Let the human do what he will. The soldiers obeyed immediately. Their fear of both their queen and their king held them still. The young warrior's companion shifted slightly, relieved to see that no immediate danger came from the human medic. Even Tomas allowed himself a small sigh of relief, knowing that the first step had been successful. Night fell completely, covering the battlefield in darkness. Fires from distant wreckage flickered, casting orange light across broken metal. The wind whispered through the ruins, carrying with it the sound of distant life returning to the world. The fallen warrior remained on the ground, but now her body was steadier, her breathing calmer. Tomas sat beside her, his eyes scanning the horizon. He knew the battle was not over, and he knew that others would challenge him. Yet for this moment, the silence of the night belonged to survival, to courage, and to the quiet power of care. In that standoff, neither human nor Zorth moved except for the medic. No one dared approach the fallen warrior except him, and in that simple truth, something remarkable began to grow, a small seed of trust, and perhaps the first step toward a future none could yet imagine. The night had deepened, and a cool wind swept across the battlefield. Stars sparkled faintly in the sky, and the sounds of distant wildlife began to return to the land. The once chaotic field now lay quiet, broken only by the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional murmur of alien soldiers standing guard. The fallen warrior stirred, her eyes fluttering open as the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon. Pain lanced through her body, sharp and insistent, but it was duller than before. Her breathing, though still shallow, was steadier. The human beside her, Tomas, moved gently, checking her bandages and adjusting the medical supplies he had brought. Tomas had never been a fighter. His body was not trained for battle, nor was he skilled in the arts of war. His strength lay in his hands and in his heart. He had seen suffering and had chosen to stand where others would not. He had made the decision long before the battle began. If a life needed saving, he would save it, no matter whose it was. The Zorth soldiers watched him cautiously. Some frowned, some whispered to each other, and a few simply stared, unable to understand why a human would risk his life for one of their most feared warriors. Even the alien king's eyes followed Tomas's movements, sharp and unblinking. Hours passed, and the warrior slowly became more aware of her surroundings. Her glowing eyes scanned the field, taking in the broken ground, the quiet humans, and the still guarding Zorth soldiers. She realized that the human had stayed beside her through the night. He had not faltered, not hesitated, and not once shown fear. For the first time, confusion filled her mind. Why would a human risk himself to help her? He was not her ally, and yet he had chosen to act. She had been trained to expect enemies to exploit weakness, to strike when a warrior was down. But this human did not. His calm hands, his quiet voice, and his unwavering presence challenged everything she had ever known about humans. Tomas spoke softly as he worked. You are healing. Rest now. Do not try to move too much. The sun is coming, and we have time. The warrior's lips moved slightly. She tried to speak, but the words came weakly. You risk yourself for me. Tomas did not hesitate. He shook his head gently. Not for you, not for anyone else. I do this because it is right. Life is worth saving, even in war. That is all I know. She closed her eyes, trying to understand. His words were simple, yet their meaning was profound. She had been trained to fight, to conquer, and to survive by strength and fear. Yet this human showed her a different kind of strength, one that did not rely on weapons or fire. He showed courage of a different kind of courage born of care. The alien king's gaze softened slightly as he observed the exchange. He had seen warriors rise and fall, battles won and lost, and yet he had never witnessed such calm bravery. The human was fragile, yet his presence carried more weight. Than the strongest soldier in the king's army, he had chosen to step forward. When everyone else stepped back, the warrior stirred again, shifting slightly on the ground. Pain shot through her body, and she gritted her teeth. Tomas placed a steady hand on her shoulder, helping her ease into a more comfortable position. She looked at him, suspicion in her eyes, but also a growing curiosity. Do you fear me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tomas smiled faintly. I do not fear you. I respect you. You are strong, and you are brave. But I do not let fear control me. I act when I must, even when danger is near. The warrior's eyes narrowed. Respect was not a word she had heard often, especially from an enemy. Fear, obedience, loyalty, these were the words her people valued. Respect from a human was unusual, and it unsettled her. She had always believed humans to be weak, selfish, and unpredictable. Yet this one human defied her expectations. The first rays of sunlight touched the battlefield, illuminating the broken armor and torn banners. Tomas worked quickly but carefully, checking each injury and applying treatment. The warrior's strength began to return, though she remained cautious and tense. She tested her limbs gently, wincing at pain, but finding that movement was becoming easier. The Zorth soldiers whispered among themselves, watching closely. They had never seen a human act in such a manner. Some wondered if this was a trick, a trap, or a trick of the mind. Others began to question their own beliefs about humans. Could they be more than enemies? Could they have courage and honor, as this medic displayed? The alien king finally spoke, his voice calm but powerful. Leave the human to his work. He acts with purpose. None shall interfere. His words were met with silence. The soldiers obeyed, some reluctantly, some with awe. They stepped back, giving the fallen warrior and the human space. The battlefield felt different now, no longer only a place of death and fear. A quiet understanding hung in the air, fragile but present. The warrior's breathing deepened as she began to trust, slowly and cautiously. Tomas continued to tend to her wounds, speaking softly when necessary and letting silence fill the rest of the time. The bond between them grew, not through words or promises, but through action. Each careful movement, each moment of patience, built a bridge between human and alien. For the first time since the battle began, the warrior felt hope, not because she had been saved, but because someone believed her life was worth saving. Tomas had made a decision that no one else would make. He had chosen to act, to step into danger, and to heal. As the sun rose higher, warming the battlefield, the warrior's strength continued to return. She sat up slowly, testing her body. Pain shot through her arms and legs, but she endured it. Tomas adjusted the last bandages and helped her rise to her feet. The Zorth soldiers watched, astonished, as their champion stood. She was still weak, but alive, and she had been restored by a human. The king's eyes gleamed with pride and curiosity. The field that had once been a place of death now held a quiet lesson. Courage could come in many forms, and strength could be measured not only by the sword, but by the heart. The warrior looked at Tomas. Her eyes, once filled with suspicion and anger, now held a new understanding. She did not yet know if she could trust him fully, But she knew this human had risked everything to save her. That act alone demanded respect. Tomas smiled faintly, standing beside her. "You are healing. Keep moving slowly. You will be stronger soon." The warrior nodded. She felt a quiet determination growing inside her. The battle was not yet over, and the war still loomed, but she had learned something valuable. Strength was not only in power, not only in weapons, and not only in fear. Sometimes it was in the courage to step forward when others stepped back, to help when everyone else waited, and to choose life when death seemed certain. The human medic had made his decision long before the battle ended. He had chosen to act, and in doing so, he had changed the course of that moment, perhaps even the future. And for the first time, the fallen warrior began to see the human not as an enemy, but as an ally, at least in that small, quiet corner of the battlefield. The battlefield was quiet under the full light of morning. Broken banners fluttered gently in the breeze, and the ground, scarred by conflict, seemed almost peaceful in the early hours. The fallen warrior now stood, her body still sore, but her posture strong. Her eyes, glowing faintly, scanned the area. The human beside her, Tomas, moved steadily, adjusting his pack and preparing supplies for what might come next. The Zorth soldiers remained in their positions, still cautious, still tense. They had never seen their champion saved by an enemy, and the sight unsettled them. Whispers spread among the ranks, some filled with fear, others with awe. Even the young warriors, who had only known combat and dominance, began to question what they had been taught about humans. The alien king stood atop the rise, watching intently. His face was calm, but his mind was sharp, analyzing every movement, every glance. He had ruled for decades, and he had faced countless battles. Yet this situation was unlike any he had seen before. A human had stepped into the center of danger, faced the pride of the Zorth warrior, and survived. That alone demanded respect. The warrior moved slowly, testing her strength. Her legs trembled slightly, but she refused to sit again. She wanted to prove to herself, and perhaps to Tomas, that she could still stand. Her pride was wounded, but her spirit was unbroken. "You are strong," Tomas said quietly. "You will heal, but you must be careful. The others are watching." The warrior's eyes met his. For the first time, there was no suspicion in her gaze. Instead, there was curiosity and a faint sense of respect. "Why do you continue to help me?" she asked. Tomas looked at her calmly. "Because it is right. Because someone must act. That is enough reason for me." The warrior paused, considering his words. They were simple, yet they carried weight. She had been trained to value strategy, strength, and victory above all else. This human spoke of principles, of choices that had nothing to do with fear or honor. She did not fully understand, but she felt the truth in his words. The Zorth soldiers began to shift slightly, some stepping back, giving space to the two figures in the center. They had been ordered to watch, to protect, but the presence of Tomas made them uneasy. Their queen had survived, and yet a human had touched her, healed her, and been allowed to remain. Such defiance of tradition was unprecedented. The alien king finally spoke, his voice deep and commanding. "Warrior, you stand because he allowed it. Human, you act with courage. Both of you test the boundaries of honor and fear." The warrior's eyes narrowed. She had heard the king's words, but she did not fully understand their meaning. She had been raised to obey, to conquer, to strike first and show no weakness. Yet this human had faced her without hesitation and had not faltered. That was unfamiliar, and it unsettled her deeply. Tomas moved closer to the warrior, offering support as she tested her arms and shoulders. "You are stronger than you think," he said. "Trust yourself, move carefully, but do not give in to fear." The warrior took a deep breath and nodded slightly. She began to walk slowly, feeling her strength returning. Each step was measured, deliberate, a silent declaration that she would not fall again. Her pride was intact, her will unbroken, and her respect for the human beside her grew with every careful movement. The soldiers watched silently, unable to look away. They had seen warriors rise and fall countless times, but never had a human stood beside one of their most feared champions without fear. Their minds struggled to reconcile what they saw with what they had been taught. The king's eyes studied Tomas closely. "You risked your life for one of my warriors," he said. "Why?" Tomas met the king's gaze steadily. "Because life matters. Because someone must act when others hesitate. Because it is right." The king considered this. He had expected excuses, strategies, arguments about alliances or power. Instead, he heard simple truth, spoken without hesitation or doubt. It was unsettling, but also remarkable. Perhaps, he thought, the human strength was not in the body, but in the heart. The warrior continued to move, testing her legs and arms. Feeling the tightness in her muscles begin to loosen, she glanced at Tomas, realizing that he had not left her side once. He had been patient, careful, and steady. His presence gave her confidence she had not felt in years. Suddenly, a loud sound broke the quiet of the morning. A branch snapped in the distance, and the Zorth soldiers immediately shifted, weapons raised. Tomas held up a hand, signaling calm. The warrior stiffened, ready for action. But Tomas stepped forward slightly, demonstrating no fear. From the trees emerged a group of humans, cautiously approaching. They had come to check on Tomas, unsure of the situation and anxious for his safety. The Zorth soldiers tensed, ready to defend. But the king raised a hand, stopping them. "Let them come." The king commanded. "This human acts with purpose. He does not seek to harm, only to heal. Observe carefully." The approaching humans stopped a few meters away. Their eyes widened as they saw the fallen warrior standing, supported by Tomas. They had expected a battlefield of fear and pain, but instead found a quiet scene of recovery and courage. The warrior watched the humans carefully, her instincts alert, yet she felt no desire to attack. She understood now that Tomas's courage had created a space where trust could exist. Even in the midst of war, Tomas turned briefly to the approaching humans. "Stay back," he said quietly. "Give her space. Do not interfere." The humans nodded, recognizing his authority and the situation's delicacy. They waited silently, respecting the human medic's careful judgment. The warrior took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on her armor and the steady presence of Tomas beside her. She realized that her strength was returning not only because of her body, but because of the courage shown to her. She had been tested, challenged, and saved, and now she was ready to face whatever came next. The king watched silently, noting every detail. His soldiers remained alert, yet he sensed a shift in the air. Something had changed. The battle had ended for now, but a deeper conflict, the clash of wills, courage, and understanding had begun. Tomas adjusted his pack and looked at the warrior. "You are ready," he said simply. "Move carefully, trust yourself, and the rest will follow." The warrior nodded. For the first time in many days, she felt a sense of control. Not over others, but over herself. She could stand, fight, and survive, and she knew that, in this human, she had found not a threat, but an unexpected ally. The battlefield remained quiet, the sun climbing higher, warming the scarred earth. The soldiers watched in awe, the king observed with curiosity, and the humans waited with cautious hope. In that moment, the clash of wills had not ended in violence or death. Instead, it had created understanding, respect, and the beginning of a bond that neither human nor Zorth had anticipated. The warrior took a step forward, then another, testing her balance. Tomas remained close, supporting her subtly without interfering. She felt the strength in her legs, the steadiness in her arms, and the courage in her heart. The clash of wills had not destroyed her, it had awakened her. And so, under the brightening sun, the fallen warrior began to reclaim her place, not just on the battlefield, but in the new understanding that courage and honor could take many forms, even from the hands of a human. The sun climbed higher, warming the battlefield and casting long shadows across the torn ground. The fallen warrior now stood fully upright, her armor polished by Tomas's careful hands. Each movement she made was precise and controlled, as if she were testing the limits of her returning strength. The air felt alive, charged with expectation, as the Zorth soldiers and their king observed the quiet scene. Tomas adjusted his pack and looked at her. "You are ready," he said calmly, "but the first test will be difficult. You must trust yourself and act with care. Do not rush." The warrior's eyes narrowed slightly. "Focused and alert. First test?" she asked, her voice firm but low. Tomas nodded. "Yes, the king wishes to see your strength, not only in combat but in judgment and control. This is not only about your body, it is about your mind, your courage, and your ability to act under pressure." The warrior considered his words carefully. She had fought countless battles, faced countless enemies, yet this felt different. This was not about defeating someone else. This was about proving herself after being saved, about showing that she could rise from weakness and make wise decisions. The king's voice rang out, strong and clear. "Warrior, you have recovered enough to face a test. It will not be an easy challenge. Your opponent is skilled, and the rules are strict. You must act with strength and precision, or fail." The warrior stepped forward, feeling her muscles tense with anticipation. She had trained for such moments her entire life, yet she sensed that this test would require more than strength. It would require patience, wisdom, and courage. The king raised his hand, and a large holographic arena appeared before them, shimmering in the sunlight. It was designed for training, with shifting platforms, moving obstacles, and holographic opponents. The test would measure not only her combat skills but her ability to adapt and think quickly. Tomas stood beside her, offering quiet support. "Remember," he said softly, "strength is not always an attack. Sometimes it is in patience and observation. Watch carefully, act wisely, and trust yourself." The warrior nodded. She took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun and the steady presence of Tomas beside her. Then, with precise steps, she entered the arena. The holographic opponents appeared immediately. They moved quickly, testing her reflexes and endurance. The warrior dodged and struck, her movements fluid and controlled. Her muscles responded well, her mind sharp. She felt her strength returning fully, yet she did not rely solely on power. She observed each opponent, noticed patterns, and predicted their actions. Tomas watched carefully from the sidelines, ready to intervene only if necessary. He did not touch her, did not guide her directly. This was her test, and she needed to face it herself. The first wave of holographic opponents fell quickly. Their simulated attacks anticipated and countered with precision. The warrior moved with grace, her confidence growing with each successful action. Yet the second wave was different. It was faster, more unpredictable, designed to challenge her adaptability and judgment. She paused briefly, taking a deep breath. She remembered Tomas's words, "Strength is not always an attack. Sometimes it is in patience and observation." She studied the patterns carefully, noticed subtle cues in the opponent's movements, and adjusted her strategy. She did not rush, did not panic. Instead, she acted with calm precision, countering attacks while maintaining her own balance and control. The soldiers watching were silent, impressed by her skill and composure. Even the king's eyes gleamed with curiosity. He had seen many warriors in his time, but few had the combination of strength, intelligence, and patience that she displayed. The third wave of opponents appeared, even more challenging than the last. They moved unpredictably, testing not only her reflexes but her ability to make quick decisions under pressure. The warrior's heart pounded, yet she remained focused. She moved swiftly, but her actions were calculated, not rushed. She struck with precision, blocked with careful timing, and maneuvered around obstacles with skill. Tomas's eyes followed every movement. He did not speak, only observed, knowing that she needed to rely on herself. The trust between them had grown, silent but strong. He knew she could succeed if she maintained focus, courage, and patience. The final wave approached, the most difficult. Yet, the holographic opponents were larger, faster, and unpredictable. The warrior felt a surge of tension, but did not hesitate. she assessed the situation, noticed the openings, and acted decisively. Her attacks were strong, precise, and timely. Her defense was steady, her movements graceful, yet powerful. The arena's light shifted as she completed the final wave. A hush fell over the soldiers and the human observers. The holographic opponents dissolved, leaving the warriors standing. Alone in the center of the arena, breathing evenly, sweat on her brow. But her posture strong and proud. The king's voice echoed across the arena. "Warrior, you have succeeded in the first test. You have shown strength, judgment, and courage. You have proven that recovery does not mean weakness, and that bravery is measured not only by the body but by the mind." The warrior lowered her stance slightly, acknowledging the king's words. She felt a mixture of relief, pride, and newfound confidence. She had faced a challenge not designed to break her physically, but to test her resilience, judgment, and courage. She had passed. Tomas stepped forward, offering a hand. "You did well," he said simply. "You trusted yourself, and it paid off." The warrior glanced at him, a faint smile on her lips. "I could not have done it without your guidance," she admitted. "Not your direct help, but your support. It gave me confidence." Tomas shook his head slightly. "No, this was your victory. I only reminded you of what you already had inside. Courage, strength, wisdom. They were always there. You just had to trust them." The soldiers around the arena whispered among themselves, impressed by what they had witnessed. The human had not fought for her, yet his presence had enabled her to succeed. The warrior had regained her strength, tested her skills, and proven herself not only to the king and soldiers but to herself. The king watched silently, a thoughtful expression on his face. This test had been more than a physical challenge. It had revealed the warrior's character, resilience, and ability to rise after being saved. He had expected skill, but he had witnessed growth, courage, and wisdom. The warrior stepped out of the arena, her posture tall and confident. She approached Tomas, who smiled quietly. The sun shone brightly overhead, casting warm light on the battlefield. The first test was complete, but both knew that more challenges awaited. The warrior had regained her strength, but she would face additional trials, testing her courage, judgment, and loyalty further. For now, however, there was a moment of calm. The warrior had passed the first test, not through raw strength alone, but through careful observation, courage, and the trust she had learned to place in herself. Tomas had guided her, not with commands, but with quiet support and faith in her abilities. And in that moment, the bond between human and warrior grew stronger, a silent understanding that they would face the challenges ahead together with courage, wisdom, and trust. The sun was slowly dipping toward the horizon, casting long golden streaks across the battlefield. The warrior, fully restored from her injuries, moved with confidence. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the surroundings as if sensing unseen dangers. Tomas walked beside her, his pace steady, his hands ready to act if needed. The king and his soldiers observed quietly from the high ground, their faces calm but alert. The first test had ended successfully, but the sense of triumph was fragile. Something in the air had changed. The wind carried whispers that seemed unnatural, and the shadows among the broken trees flickered with movement. The warrior's instincts, honed through countless battles, sensed that not all was as it appeared. "We must be cautious," Tomas said, his voice low. "Victory can make others uneasy. Not everyone will celebrate your success. Some may see it as a threat to their power." The warrior nodded. She had felt it too, a subtle shift among the Zorth soldiers and even in the king's expression. Not all acceptance came easily. Some would test her further, and some might act out of jealousy or fear. She tightened her grip on her weapon, alert to the smallest movement. As they moved along the edge of the battlefield, a figure appeared from the shadows. It was another Zorth warrior, younger and ambitious, with a tense expression. He stepped forward boldly, though his hand hovered near his weapon. "Champion," he said, his voice strained but controlled. "I challenge the outcome of your first test. You were aided by a human. That is not honor." The warrior froze slightly, sensing the tension in his tone. She had expected trials, but not a challenge so openly defiant. She looked at Tomas, who remained calm. His steady presence reminded her to act with thought and not impulse. The warrior's eyes met the young soldier's. "My strength was my own," she said firmly. "I was tested in judgment, skill, and courage. That is what matters. You may not understand, but that does not make my success invalid." The young soldier hesitated, surprised by her calm and confident reply. He had expected fear, hesitation, or anger, but not such quiet authority. Tomas stepped slightly forward, adding his presence without speaking. The human's calmness seemed to ground the warrior and disarm the challenger's hostility. The king's voice rang out, echoing across the battlefield. "Warrior, human, you are both under my observation. Respect is earned, not demanded. The test is not over until all doubts are faced." The warrior nodded subtly. She understood that the challenge was not only against the young soldier, but against the expectations of the entire army. Her actions would define her not only as a fighter, but as a leader, and a figure of influence among her people. The young soldier lunged suddenly, testing her reflexes and skill. The warrior reacted instantly, moving with precision. She did not strike aggressively, but used her opponent's momentum to guide him safely away, demonstrating both control and strength. The young soldier stumbled but quickly regained his stance, recognizing that he had been outmatched not through power alone, but through strategy and patience. Tomas observed silently, careful not to intervene. This was her confrontation, her test of judgment and restraint. The warrior's movements were fluid, her eyes sharp, and her mind focused. She realized that true strength was not in defeating someone recklessly, but in controlling them. Battle while maintaining honor. The young soldier paused, breathing heavily. He was conflicted, torn between loyalty to his pride and the realization that the warrior had proven herself fairly. The whispers among the other soldiers grew louder. Some began to murmur their support, impressed by her skill and composure. Others hesitated, unsure how to interpret the human's presence and influence. Suddenly, another shadow moved in from the tree line. A group of Zorth soldiers, loyal to the ambitious challenger, surrounded the warrior and Tomas. Their faces were tense, weapons raised, but they did not attack immediately. The king's earlier words echoed in their minds. Respect was earned. They hesitated, uncertain whether to test her or withdraw. The warrior stepped forward calmly, her posture commanding. "I seek no conflict," she said firmly. "I have faced the test set before me and succeeded. If you wish to challenge me, do so with honor, not fear or anger." Her words, simple yet powerful, created a pause among the soldiers. Tomas's steady presence reinforced her authority. The young soldier who had first challenged her glanced around, realizing that his allies were waiting for his signal. He lowered his weapon slightly, understanding that the warrior's strength was not only physical, but moral and strategic. The king finally spoke again, his voice carrying authority. "You have faced not only the test of skill, but the challenge of trust and leadership. Shadows of betrayal are present in many forms, yet courage and wisdom will expose them. Warrior, human, your bond demonstrates that strength lies in understanding and cooperation, not fear." The warrior and Tomas exchanged a brief glance. They understood the weight of the king's words. The shadows of betrayal were still present, unseen but sensed. Some soldiers would test loyalty, some would act out of envy, and some might seek to undermine trust. They had passed the first challenge, but vigilance was necessary. The ambitious young soldier stepped forward, lowering his weapon fully. "I see now," he said quietly. "Strength is not only in combat, but in control and judgment. I will observe further before acting." The other soldiers, influenced by his example, began to lower their weapons as well. The tension in the air eased slightly, though the sense of caution remained. Tomas nodded to the warrior, silently conveying that they had passed this confrontation safely. The warrior exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the challenge lift. She had faced not only physical tests, but moral and social ones as well. The shadows of betrayal had been acknowledged and held at bay for now. Yet she knew that vigilance and wisdom were necessary for in times of victory. Hidden threats often grew stronger. The king descended from his vantage point, his expression thoughtful. He approached the warrior and Tomas, his steps deliberate. You have proven yourselves in skill, courage, and judgment. Yet remember this, the path ahead is fraught with unseen challenges. Shadows of betrayal linger in hearts and minds. Trust carefully, act wisely, and remain vigilant. The warrior bowed slightly, acknowledging his words. Tomas stood beside her, calm and ready, his presence a constant support. Together, they faced the horizon, understanding that their alliance was not only a bond of trust but a shield against the uncertainties ahead. As the sun set, the battlefield was bathed in warm orange light. The warrior felt her strength returning fully, her resolve firm. Tomas remained close, their bond growing silently but firmly. The shadows of betrayal had not overtaken them. They had faced the challenge with courage, wisdom, and trust, yet both knew that the next trials would demand even more. The warrior's journey was far from over. The test of loyalty, courage, and strategy would continue. Shadows could return at any moment, and vigilance was the key to survival and success for now. However, there was a moment of quiet triumph. The warrior had faced not only her own doubts, but the envy and suspicion of others. She had risen, tested herself, and proven her strength and wisdom. Tomas had guided her, not by control, but through calm support, allowing her to face challenges and emerge victorious. The battlefield, scarred yet serene, witnessed the beginning of a deeper understanding. Trust had been tested, courage had been measured, and the shadows of betrayal had been met with clarity. The warrior and the human stood together, ready to face whatever trials the future held. The morning sun rose over the battlefield, casting a pale light on the remnants of past tests. The warrior stood tall, her armor gleaming, her eyes sharp and alert. Tomas, the human medic, walked beside her, carrying his pack lightly, his expression calm yet focused. The king observed from a high platform, his gaze steady and deliberate. The time for the final test had come. This was the challenge that would decide the warrior's true standing, not only as a fighter, but as a leader and protector. Rumors of dissent had surfaced. Whispers of betrayal had lingered in the shadows, and today everything would be revealed. The king raised his hand, and the arena's boundaries shimmered into existence. This final test was unlike the previous ones. It combined physical skill, strategic thinking, and the ability to maintain trust under pressure. Holographic opponents appeared, moving unpredictably, but there were also real soldiers among them, testing loyalty, courage, and judgment. The warrior stepped forward, taking in the entire arena. She sensed the tension in the soldiers and knew that the final test was not only about combat. It was about making choices that would affect the trust and respect of everyone present. Tomas remained close, offering silent support. His presence gave her confidence, but she knew the victory must come from her own decisions. The first wave of opponents moved swiftly. Holographic figures lunged, twisted, and struck from unexpected angles. The warrior moved with precision, countering each attack, observing patterns, and adjusting her movements carefully. She had mastered control in previous tests, but this challenge demanded even more anticipation, patience, and judgment. The soldiers testing her loyalty stepped forward, weapons ready but not aggressive. They watched for hesitation or weakness, evaluating her ability to act decisively while maintaining honor. The warrior's eyes scanned each of them. She understood that strength was more than defeating an opponent. It was inspiring confidence and respect. Tomas noticed subtle changes in the warrior's stance, the faint hesitation in their expressions. He realized that the test's true challenge was not the holographic opponents, but the human. Emotions and judgments intertwined with the trial. He stayed close, ready to assist if anything went beyond safety, but he trusted her instincts. A sudden commotion erupted on one side of the arena. The ambitious young soldier who had challenged her before was now at the center of a confrontation. With another soldier, it seemed planned, a distraction meant to test her attention and judgment. The warrior did not hesitate. She moved toward the scene, her steps confident and deliberate. The soldiers surrounding the confrontation paused, watching her approach. She did not attack or intervene aggressively. Instead, she used calm authority, separating the combatants. With precise movements and clear instructions, "Step back," she said firmly. "This is not the way to test strength or loyalty. We will act with honor and wisdom, not anger." Her words had immediate effect. The soldiers hesitated, then stepped back, lowering their weapons. The young soldier looked at her, eyes wide with surprise and respect. He realized that her strength lay not only in combat but in judgment, leadership, and control. Tomas watched quietly, impressed. He understood that the warrior had passed the first part of the final test. She had acted decisively under pressure, maintained her integrity, and demonstrated leadership without using force unnecessarily. The king's gaze was steady, a faint approval in his eyes. The next challenge emerged as the holographic arena shifted. Platforms moved, obstacles appeared, and multiple opponents advanced from all directions. The warrior adjusted quickly, moving with fluid precision, striking, blocking, and dodging as needed. Each action was calculated, each movement purposeful. She was no longer just reacting. She anticipated, controlling the pace of the battle. Suddenly, a group of soldiers attempted a coordinated attack, testing her awareness and strategic thinking. The warrior paused briefly, analyzing their positions and patterns. Then, with swift and controlled movements, she redirected their momentum, guiding them safely away while maintaining authority. Her actions earned nods of recognition from both allies and observers. Tomas felt a surge of pride. Her skill had always been impressive, but now it was clear that her mind, courage, and leadership had grown even stronger. She had faced danger not only in physical form, but in subtle psychological tests. Demonstrating wisdom and restraint, the final phase of the test arrived. The king himself issued a challenge, a simulated threat representing the worst dangers her people could face. It combined speed, strength, and unpredictability, testing every skill she had learned. The warrior faced it without hesitation. Her movements were flawless. She struck with precision, dodged with control, and made rapid decisions, balancing attack and defense with equal skill. Her focus never wavered, even as the intensity of the challenge increased. Each strike, each block, each movement showed not only her strength, but her wisdom and calm under pressure. Tomas stood nearby, observing closely. He felt no fear for her safety, only admiration. She had grown stronger with each test, proving herself worthy of trust and leadership. He understood that this final confrontation was as much about demonstrating courage and judgment as about physical prowess. Finally, the simulated threat dissolved, the arena stabilized, and the soldier test ceased. Silence fell over the battlefield. All eyes turned toward the warrior, observing her standing tall, breathing evenly, and composed. Her armor reflected the sunlight, and her expression conveyed calm strength. The king spoke, his voice carrying across the arena. "Warrior, human, you have passed the final test. You have faced not only skill and strength, but judgment, loyalty, and leadership. You have shown courage, wisdom, and integrity. Your bond has proven that trust and understanding are as powerful as strength in combat." The warrior bowed slightly, acknowledging the king's words. Tomas stepped forward, a faint smile on his face. "You did it," he said softly. "Not because I helped you, but because you trusted yourself and acted with wisdom." The warrior's eyes met his, a sense of gratitude and respect passing silently between them. "I could not have faced some challenges without your calm presence," she admitted. "It gave me confidence, not in fighting, but in trusting my judgment." The king descended to the battlefield, his steps deliberate. He looked at both the warrior and Tomas. "You have proven yourselves worthy, not through brute strength alone, but through courage, wisdom, and partnership. This bond between human and warrior is a lesson for all. True strength is found in trust, integrity, and the courage to act wisely." The soldiers round the arena bowed in acknowledgement, respect evident in their expressions. The young soldier, who had challenged her earlier, stepped forward, offering a respectful nod. I understand now, he said quietly. Strength is more than skill. It is wisdom, courage, and trust. The warrior nodded, accepting the gesture. The battlefield, once tense and uncertain, was now filled with a sense of unity and respect. Tomas remained beside her, silent but present, a constant reminder of their bond. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light over the land, the warrior and Tomas stood together. They had faced tests of strength, courage, judgment, and trust. They had overcome shadows of betrayal, distractions, and challenges from unexpected places. The warrior felt her heart steady, her mind clear. She had proven herself not only as a fighter, but as a leader, earning respect and trust. Tomas had supported her with calm presence, without interfering, allowing her to rise through her own actions. The king spoke one final time, his voice calm and strong. Today, you have demonstrated that true strength comes from courage, wisdom, and trust. You have earned your place among those who protect and lead. The bond you share is rare and powerful. May it guide you in all challenges ahead. The warrior and Tomas exchanged a quiet glance, understanding the weight of the king's words. Their journey had been difficult, full of tests and trials, but they had emerged victorious. The final confrontation had proven their strength, courage, and partnership beyond doubt. The battlefield, now peaceful, bore witness to their triumph. The warrior raised her head, her eyes bright, her spirit strong. Tomas remained at her side, calm and steady. Together, they had faced the final challenge and had succeeded. The story of the warrior and the human medic would be remembered among the soldiers and the king, not only for their skill and bravery, but for the trust, wisdom, and courage that had guided them through the most difficult trials.